We can learn a lot from the woman at the well. We're going to talk about that on this episode of Time Out with Timothy.
Time out.
So what can we learn from the woman at the well? Now, Jesus was not someone to conform to social norms. And more often than not, he actually challenged them. One such challenge occurred when he talked to the Samaritan woman at the well. Okay, this is a well-known story from the life of Christ, and not without good reason. Take a minute to read John chapter 4 if you need to refamiliarize yourself with the story, or if you need to catch up with the story if you're not familiar with it already. There are many different lessons encapsulated in this story that we can apply to our daily lives, specifically related to the woman's social status. So let's take a look at some of them now. First one is she was a Samaritan. Now, Jews did not like Samaritans. They were looked at as lower class people. They were mixed breeds, half breeds, if you want to say. And the Jews did not think other Jews should associate with Samaritans. It was heavily frowned upon, to say the least. Now, the history of these two groups forged a deep distrust in both directions, which grew into deeper feelings, to say it nicely, deeper feelings of dislike and disdain. Despite that, Jesus asked this woman for water. He spoke with her in a manner that she would not have been expecting from a Jew, much less a Jewish man. He was nice, he was caring, but he was honest and he was straightforward. On top of that, Jesus offered her rivers of living water so that she would never have to thirst again. Now, this gift, up until this moment, had been reserved for the Jews. And a Samaritan being offered this, and if you're a little confused right now, that gift is the gift of eternal life. That was the first indicator that he was the Savior, the Messiah that they were looking for. And again, this is not something that he had really proclaimed too much to anyone other than some Jews at this point. But he offered this gift to her, a Samaritan woman. The obvious application of this particular lesson is racism. You know, racism is terrible. It's wrong. It's clearly wrong on all levels. There is no excuse for it, no way to justify it, period, bottom line. Now, I will mention here too, the dislike, the disdain, the hatred between Jews and Samaritans went both directions. Just like racism today goes both directions. You know, I've had a family of mine say that it can only go one direction, that the oppressed cannot distribute racism. And when I asked them to explain why, all they said was, well, they just can't. They can't explain why because there's no way to say why they can't. People can distribute racism no matter what their social status, no matter what their social class. I can be racist to another race just like another race can be racist to me. It's a human condition, and it does not belong to only one class of human. Now I'm getting way off my topic. I digress. Let me move back into talking about the woman at the well. Okay, so racism is clearly wrong on both, on all accounts, and it does flow both ways between humans. Racism is not the only application to this particular. You know, the history of the Jews and Samaritans goes all the way back to a family of 12 brothers. That's where Jews and Samaritans originally originated. They all came from this family. They all have the same roots. So don't take any relationship for granted, even family. Cultivate these relationships. Cultivate relationships with your families, with your siblings, your mom, dad, brothers, sisters, aunts and uncles, cousins. Cultivate these relationships, cherish them, grow them. We have to be aware of anything, big, little, in between, that could fester and ruin the relationship between two parties. Now, another thing, she was a she, and she was a she who had questionable morals. So Jesus, as a religious leader, some would expect him to be careful who he's seen with. This is another societal norm that Jesus challenged often. He challenged it with first one of his disciples was a tax collector, and then Zacchaeus, another tax collector, that he went to Zacchaeus' house. Jesus often approached the unclean to make them clean, whereas Jews would become unclean by being around such individuals. So Jesus, in many different ways, many different examples of him challenging the social norms of the time, and him associating with this Samaritan of questionable morals, as I say. Men dominated the culture in this time. Women and children were second-class citizens. Their opinions didn't matter. They had very little say other than what a man was willing to give them. They could even be looked at as property. But Jesus treated her like a human. Now, add on to her the fact that she had the low moral standards. She had been married 5 different times, and the one she was living with presently at that time, she was not married with. Now, that last part has wrongly become an accepted norm these days. It's beyond accepted even. It's expected by many people that a proper step in a relationship is to live together before you're married. Now, set aside the statistics that show that couples that live together before married have a higher divorce rate than couples that did not. It's funny how the biblical way tends to work better more often. But it is definitely something that we should, as a society, revert back to the biblical ways instead of the way we're moving towards and operating on now. Definitely, though, in this time, that was heavily frowned upon. And the Bible is not clear that, it doesn't give any reason really as to why her first 5 marriages failed. But I'd say it's probably a pretty safe assumption that the husband didn't commit adultery in all 5 cases. So that would mean, by the laws of her time and the standards of her time, her being remarried was an act of adultery. And the fact that she was alone at the well during the hottest part of the day points towards the fact that she was an outcast, so to speak. Typically the women would go to the well as a group. They would go either mornings or evenings when it was cooler. They would gather their water and then leave as a group. So her being alone kind of insinuates that she was dodging the women. She didn't want to be seen by them, which further insinuates that she was outcast and would not have been treated well by those women. So maybe she was dodging them because of her social standing as an outcast. Maybe the story of the Scarlet Letter comes to mind in that. This woman basically had a scarlet egg on her chest. But knowing this, because we believe Jesus was omniscient when he was on earth, just as he is in his godly spiritual form, he interacted with this woman as he would any other woman in his life. He did not throw her faults and her failures in her face and try to shame her. Neither did he ignore those faults and failures to protect her feelings. He was honest and he was respectful, and he let be said what needed to be said. Now, another thing about this woman is she was a priority to Jesus. He went out of his way to be there. or at least he went a different way than normal to be there. Now, typically, Jews would not go through Samaria. It was actually a shorter route a lot of times, but they would take a longer route simply to dodge that city, to not have to be around Samaritans. Jesus, on the other hand, purposed to go through that direction. And it is my belief that he purposed that in large part to have this interaction. This was not a chance meeting. Jesus set this up. He chose to meet this woman. And then when he got to the well, where he knew he would meet this woman at the time where he knew he would meet this woman, he sent his disciples away. He told them to go on and get lunch, go on and get food in town. He was going to rest there at the well. Now, I suspect he had good reason for this. One, what do you think that woman would have done if she walked up to the well and saw 13 men gathered around it? Do you think she would have went on up and approached it by herself? I don't. I think at best she would have waited and hoped that they went away before the other women of the town showed up. So had the disciples been there, this interaction probably did not take place. Another part of it is, if it did take place, the disciples would not have treated her very well. That would have put walls up, and this interaction would have most likely not been as effective. So Jesus sending his disciples away was another purposeful move Jesus made to create this encounter, and to create it in a way that it became a one-on-one encounter with each other. Now, I did do some speculation in that analysis, but it is logical and it fits the narrative of the story. No, I can't support it by Bible, but no, you can't disclaim it by Bible either. So sometimes you got to read between the lines and kind of piece things together to build out the narrative, you know, of what may have actually happened. And again, I'll reiterate, this is not the first time that Jesus had purposed to speak with someone that had been labeled by society as an outcast. You know, I mentioned a couple of them before. He made a habit of it. So maybe we should look at this and apply it to our own lives. You know, should we seek out more opportunities to speak to the outcast with wisdom, led by the Spirit? Speak to some quote-unquote undesirables and treat them like Jesus would. Now, the last thing I want to mention about the woman at the well is she was the key. And Jesus knew he was going to need this key to unlock a pretty big door. So he used it. This interaction was what started it. And it started with him asking her to draw water from the well. She ran up to the town proclaiming, "Come see a man." Suddenly, she was no longer dodging the people of the town, but she was running to them, shouting to get their attention, begging them to come see the man about her life. She was begging them to come see the Messiah. They listened to her. Maybe it was dumb curiosity. Maybe it was the fact that this woman out of nowhere is suddenly coming to us instead of hiding from us. Regardless of what it was, Jesus was able to use her as a key to open up the lock of this town. We need to keep our eyes open for the keys that Jesus sits in front of us. and then use them as He directs. So thank you for taking this time to listen and think about the story of the woman of the well. I hope I shared something that you maybe haven't thought of before, and maybe you'll take a fresh look at this story, and it will inspire you to do some things a little different, make some changes, or even maybe just edifies you in what you're already doing. Either way, if you like this video, please hit the like, hit the subscribe, and share this with your friends. Pass it along, share it on your socials, and let's get the word out there and worship the Lord, live our best lives, satisfy Him and His will. God bless you and have a great week. We'll see you again on Time Out with Timothy.